Hello and welcome back again to Rage Gaming and more Baldurs Gate 3 Patch 7 coverage. We're back again for a list of things you might not have known about, interesting details, mostly to do with the Patch 7, things that have changed, some PSAs, as well as some really cool new stuff to look at too, and some older stuff to look back on. Kicking us off from the beginning here though, I want to take a look at some of the incredible stuff we're seeing from the new modding toolkit. If you didn't know, last time we talked about the fact that the modding toolkit has been cracked, as it were. Larian were unable to give us like the full freedom to create custom maps, and ultimately with that, custom campaigns too. It seems that this was restricted or limited, or they just couldn't agree with Hasbro to allow players to do that. However, as they have produced the modding toolkit, modders have now cracked that to get access to everything they want, including level editors. So what we're seeing is stuff like this. This is posted by the YouTube channel with just a blacked out profile picture. I've seen a lot of posts about this on the Reddit, but this is the YouTube page where they're posting all of their work in progress and also different showcases of how to get things working. So if you're interested in this stuff, I strongly recommend this channel, but obviously what they're doing is making like a little custom Infernus map inspired very clearly by Kaled here with all the red mushrooms and running red water, but it's a very exciting concept, but it's not the only one we can see. They've got this kind of island on these rocks and the sea where there's a bridge and a platform leading up to a huge tower like a lighthouse design, where again, they have players able to walk around and interact with this environment. Seeing stuff like this is basically making people ravenous, or rather very excited for the possibility of people being able to remake things like sections of Baldurs Gate 1 and 2 using what we have here with Baldurs Gate 3. When I first heard that theory and the cracked modding tool, I thought, okay, maybe we'll get some levels, but could we really see something as in-depth as a campaign of the original games? Seeing things like this makes me think that it would be possible. And what's insane is this has been achieved in just over like a week and a half, nearly 2 weeks since the modding toolkit was actually cracked. So the potential on this one feels really big. It's really cool to look at. Please check out this channel if you want to look more into this. But yeah, really exciting stuff. For our next thing to talk about though, I want to talk about Karlach and how she's really just lost her head recently. This is not a new bug, it's actually been around for a while, but in patch 7 and previous patches, things like this do get addressed and changed and fixed. The old method to cause a headless talking Karlach was quite simple. All you needed to do was go defeat her after talking with the Paladins to try to collect her head. Now previously you could interact with the body and have that little moment where you consider cutting off the head, but mid-decision you could swap to a different character, revive her, then cut off her head anyway, and that would leave her headless. That has been patched out, it would seem. I tried to do it today, but there is another simple method, and that one obviously works still. So again, you talk to the Paladins, you go kill her, and then you can see that she drops her head, it's in her inventory. Instead of looting that, what you do is you revive her, and now that head, her own head, appears in her own inventory if you try to pickpocket her in this moment. Successfully pickpocket the head, and that results in no head and yet alive Karlach. It's pretty crazy, and the level of detail on this like severed neck is insane to look at. Like, why did they go so hard on that? It honestly looks incredible, and yes, she stays like this for seemingly an unknown period of time to me. For example, I was able to get her to join my party and come do whatever with me. We wandered around a bit, have all the conversations with other NPCs, still headless. I took her back to camp. Yep, she's just chilling, no head needed. So if you want a fully functional headless Karlach for some reason, you can do it through this method in patch 7. Next up, a 100% confirmation on something that was kind of pretty well known, like not so secret. The character Withers is an interesting one, and his lore is honestly fantastic. Down to the way that this dude literally goes and passes in front of his own statue, like a statue of himself, and stands there and comments on how this place has fallen to disarray when you first activate him. Withers is not just some dude who happens to be able to respec and revive and spawn people for, hiring purposes. Withers is Jurgle. To my understanding, Jurgle was a former god of death, and at this stage Jurgle is basically subservient to the current god of death. Now in Baldurs Gate 3, we have the Dead Three, that's Bane, Bal and Merkel, and we have the whole absolute plotline with their Chosen in Baldurs Gate 3. Withers helps our party as we ultimately go against the Chosen of those three, and he's using those incredible powers to permanently revive us and do all this crazy stuff, because yeah, he's a former god of death, and you know, you'd need a literal god to be able to do those game-breaking things. It's kind of on the nose in many ways. For example, when you walk into the tomb, if you pass, I believe it's a history check or religion check, your character will literally comment on this being a tomb for Jurgle. And then there's this giant statue of the god of death. So this is the scribe of death appearance, to my understanding. That's why he's got all those notes. And we even have the book of dead gods in the adjacent room. And obviously there's that final cinematic where he talks about the dead three and he calls them vermin, basically chastises them. But even though it's acknowledged in different ways and kind of on the nose in different ways, I don't think it's directly ever said Withers is Jurgle, unless you look into the game. And as we've seen thanks to the toolkit, yeah, we can see what the devs were calling him. They weren't calling him Withers at all. His position in the camp is referred to as S_camp_Jurgle Knight POS, or position, I guess. So that's Jurgle's spawn point and standing point at night in the camp, which is obviously where Withers stands because that's Withers' location. Like I say, this is old new news. It's the first time we get to see it directly in your face like that in-game if you're messing with the toolkit. But apparently they've been referencing Withers as Jurgle in the code since early access for a good 4 years now. So it's not a super hidden, super secret just now found, but nice to get that kind of very direct confirmation. And as it's something I've never talked about in this series, yeah, I just think it's pretty cool. Speaking of early access though, the Origin characters have been through quite some serious changes compared to their original versions, if you didn't know. Not just the outfits they wear, but the very design of the character. I was aware of that concept, but it's just something I've never stopped to really look into and look at. And one of the ones that I saw on the Reddit was to do with Karlach. And her journey is one of the most interesting in my opinion, so I want to look back on that. This post was by the Reddit user Sprinkles7864, showing what appeared to be Karlach's very first appearance. A lot of people were commenting on the fact that she looks actually quite similar to Will, just like a tiefling version. And obviously Will with his horns, not too dissimilar, right? I like that concept of Will and Karlach looking kind of similar, because obviously Will has that big grudge against her in Act 1. What's kind of interesting about this though is even at this first stage, people would refer to Karlach as the one-horn tiefling. And in her first version, as we can see, is she's clearly got 2 horns. So they always planned to progress from this. This was always clearly a placeholder. But then it gets way more interesting. This second version is significantly more Karlach-like. We have the one horn now. We've got the axe on the back. We've got kind of braided hair. She's slightly scarred on her face. And she's got that like deep red hue. Significantly different to the Will Karlach version we just looked at. This is big progress. But at the same time, not like hyper unique, still very clearly just a tiefling you could maybe customize yourself. So this next version, posted by Test Subject 003, really shows the difference how they made her a much more unique character that I'm not sure we'd be able to create in the creator. It's looking a lot more like Karlach now. She actually has those red highlights in the hair. And speaking of the hair, it's shaved on the side and you have that long mane coming around the back that's semi-braided but not fully. This is way more Karlach that we know today than compared to before, but obviously it doesn't compare to the final version we see her as, which is ultimately like a lot more feminine, or that older version looks like she's been through a lot of brutal war. She's been beaten and bloodied and she's got the scars to show it. The newer, more up-to-date version looks a lot less so. Not necessarily a bad thing. Our current version of Karlach's great, but it is interesting how they were considering that different route very nearly. Although obviously guys, the optimal true end version of Karlach is the headless version that we looked at in this video. Next up, I want to talk about a weird thing that I saw by the Reddit poster Anzuda, which is basically a really unique concept. There are failsafes in terms of equipment for the Origin characters if they spawn in, at the start of the game, without the proper equipment. That could happen for any number of reasons, I suppose, but in specific cases with people like Lae'zel and Shadowheart, you directly get them to join your party while you're still on the nautiloid. And so when you're in that, you could just strip them of all of their gear, all of their items, take it all for yourself, and then when you complete the nautiloid section and find each other on the beach after, if you freed Shadowheart, the very first person you'll find next to you lying there is Shadowheart. And in the case of Anzuda, they found when they did this that Shadowheart was spawned in with that backup equipment, wearing bandit's armor, and she also gets their crude hammer instead of her iconic starting outfit. As surmised, it does make sense that if she landed here on her own, she would have time to loot some of the bodies and get some new equipment instead of having nothing, especially if you didn't actually rescue her, so you find her down later at the beach, fully functional. She would definitely have had time to loot then. But in this case, I wanted to test how true this was or how it worked, and I did it in multiple multiple ways myself, taking her equipment at different stages, finishing the nautiloid, and yeah, I could not get this to happen for me. Apparently, if you do it for Lae'zel, she just loses all of her equipment and stays without it. But I saw in the comments someone called Sheltered Muse talking about how when they were messing with mods, they found that shadowheart has this fail-safe armor and weapons in her tools. So it makes sense to think that the origin characters have like fail-safe equipment and stuff. But I wonder what it is that actually causes them to trigger and what they kind of gave them. I'd love to see that. All right, next up, just a little PSA about two concepts that have been talked about actually on the Reddit a little bit, but I've gone and tested it myself. Basically, there are two well-known tricks that you could do on the nautiloid ship to help with the commander room fight. One of them is to split up your party and have a team actually enter and then leave someone outside who will then sneak up and shoot, say, the cambions that spawn in after you've already fought and passed a few turns. For some reason, it wouldn't put this left out player in the turn order, allowing you to infinitely range kill the cambions and yeah, have a huge advantage. Unfortunately, since patch 7, they seem to have changed this, so they will now acknowledge you attacking them and immediately go for you, so that doesn't work anymore. But I saw a lot of discussion about how the blockages don't work anymore either. What that is basically gathering the different chests in the starting area. I believe there's 3 from my testing today, as well as some smaller chests and items you can also stack up to create basically this wall of garbage in the entrance to the commander fight. Using these items, you create a wall, and then as the cambions spawn about turn 9, they just can't get past. They're stuck out there, making the fight significantly easier for more turns. Unfortunately, it does seem to have been patched after my testing. They are indeed flying over any blockages you make at this point. And I do mean any, because I tried it at the starting point in a few different ways. And I also did the other one where you stack just 2 on top of each other, because that's the max you can do, right in the entrance to the commander where you trigger the actual fight. Even then, they just flew over it. They do try to attack the chest and there's a bit of a delay, but eventually they just fly through. So they obviously don't want you using these 2 different cheese methods. And so, yeah, patch 7, they're gone. So if you have any bonus advice on how to deal with the commander fight on harder difficulties, let us know. Lastly for today though, I've just got a funny one. Posted by Bean Patrol 27 on the Reddit. After Act 7, they've noticed some glitches in some cutscenes. Like this one with Mizora. For some reason in this scene, in one specific wide shot, the player's Tav was undressed on the top side. I'm censoring it for the video, but yes, they basically deleted her top half of clothing for some reason. But only in that specific wide shot. As soon as it turns to a different shot and you can see the Tav again, you see that she's fully clothed and normal. So just be aware that some cutscenes are randomly changing the clothing that you or the other characters are wearing. And I expect a hotfix on this one, but if you have noticed some weirdness like that, this is probably the same bug, so again, expect a hotfix. But there you have it, just a bunch of things to do with patch 7, some of the changes, some stuff that still works, some stuff that definitely doesn't work anymore, and some of the cool stuff we're seeing with modding in general. Hopefully I can be back soon and have a look at like a proper level made by someone. For now though, I hope this was useful or interesting. I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.